Hi, folks. Welcome to the second episode of Serverless Craic with self, Dave Anderson, author at the Serverless Edge and technical fellow for Bizarre Voice. I'll let the two gentlemen introduce themselves.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mike O'Reilly, architect at Globalization Partners and contributor to the Serverless Edge.
Mark McCann, author, contributor at Serverless Edge. Currently not working for anybody, so letting the lads do the heavy lifting here.
There's a focus on engineers, but there's also, if you're using the cloud, you want to be using it the proper way. So there's almost like a wee clash now between what the cloud is offering and the capabilities and skills that the engineers need to have. And I noticed AWS, there was an OR event on, I think it was 2 days ago. It's a modern application modernization. Was that an AWS had a summit?
Modern application, modern application day.
That was
days ago,
and there was
really
a
good.
nice, that was a cracking event. And I think it's really interesting to see the language that AWS are starting to use. They're moving away from containers and microservices and functions, and they're talking about just a modern application and trying to bring together a lot of technologies, which I think is brilliant, because there's always an unholy war between technology A and technology B, but they're trying to lift it up a level. They say, why are you, and it's a question I made a real a pest of myself when we were going to the cloud, saying, why are we doing this? And then you optimize for that. And there's always a number of different reasons for different personas in the company and the executive. So I thought this was kind of nice, this type of idea, talking about drivers for modernizing applications right across teams, between the CIO, the CSO and security, the VP of big data, and then the VP of infrastructure and ops. So I thought that's a nice idea. The CIO is looking for productivity to drive own customer experience, improve that. CSO, obviously, the CISO has security and compliance, global scale. The data person, VP, talking about ML, data transformation, getting data tightened up. And then infrastructure, so about scale, supply chain, vendor consolidation, cost reduction. So
it's back to what we were talking about the why. I think, and throughout I've watched quite a few of the presentations on this day, and I think AWS are getting a lot better at understanding the needs of their users now. It's not just here's shiny tech and go use shiny tech. They're articulating better the needs, like we have here in this image here of their users, which is good to see.
Yeah, you kind of look at that image. I think it was you, Mark, was saying about like the environment for success. When you kind of look at some of these reasons for modernization, you're kind of going, well, a lot of that is kind of applied at a fairly, high level within an organization. So like we need to, leverage the cloud's sort of capabilities with regards to security and compliance, because these guys, obviously they're experts in that field. Therefore, that, again, we're transitioning that responsibility up. Again, it's less on the individual squad. So again, we're getting benefit there. Agility and staff productivity, like being able to provision stuff rapidly, creating an environment for success, and again, these are things that probably are applied at different sorts of levels, and when you go down into the application level as well, again, I just want to reinforce the point you made earlier. What was it you said? Serverless is
it's better. It's not easier.
So as you do shift into the cloud and you start to leverage these, cloud native sort of characteristics, there's a lot that teams need to kind of absorb themselves in.
Different mindset. Yep.
Different mindset altogether. So you got to understand the security kind of sort of approach. You got to understand how scaling works. So what. Because you'll see teams rushing in and wanting to sort of do sort of multi-tenancy and multi-region kind of architectures, but take your time. It's there when you need to leverage it. So there's a lot more that kind of shifts left into the squad. And again, that's another dimension to this. I think you got to keep an eye on. Like,
the full stack just got a lot bigger, and the cognitive burden that entails has exploded for our teams.
Yeah, you offload stuff, but you have to do a lot more.
Yeah, and I think again that goes back to, you need a certain type of organization that has psychological safety, supports that continuous and learning culture, because you will make mistakes, but you can quickly correct them. If you're following all the sort of recommended practices. And then that's a momentum. Again, that's probably baked into the sort of the flywheel concept.
And even you talk about it earlier around the observability and the productivity measures and all that stuff. You got to measure differently, because you can spend an entire day just reading the docs or experimenting with stuff to make a one-line change, and you only made one line code change, but you've delivered the business impact, you've delivered the value, you've following well-architected practices and principles. But that's a way more productive than somebody who's knocked out 10,000 lines of code in a day and not thought about the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger picture thing, and you can sort of see there's almost like, I thought this was a nice one as well, like there's a lot of challenges that people have around kind of, slowness and tools and stuff, but they're solved in a different way in modern development. And I think a lot of people just haven't, I don't want to say haven't educated themselves, but it's moving so fast, it's hard to keep up. And a lot of the traditional material doesn't talk about this stuff. No, I mean, we've had to learn this stuff the hard way by making mistakes and realizing that you're being stupid. But it's taken a long time, and a lot of books read and talks watched, etc.
Yeah, I think the term we like using now is flow efficiency. These challenges across the top here impact your flow efficiency. They impact the flow of value to your customers, your end users, your business. And if, with the more modern techniques and processes and practices that we've sort of learned the hard way, they help improve that time to value. They help improve that flow efficiency. They remove those impediments from your developer's life, and that's it. It's like it's continuous problem prevention, because this stuff changes every day. It's a full-time job keeping abreast of it.
Well, it really is. Well, you took, and again, that flow efficiency is an interesting sort of way of describing it, and again, kind of back to mapping, like if you do like that Wardley map you launched there 2030 and sort of going from runtime to serverless, you can see that in that deck, that modern applications, so symptoms of these inertia points are kind of described in blue there along the kind of on the previous slide, and removal of those inertia points then kind of allow some of this emergent practice, which are kind of described on the next level down there on that modern applications slide. So that's a perfect example of making the map real. So there's inertia points at the minute is a developer waiting on infrastructure being provisioned because it's on-prem, and somebody in ops has to go and do a bunch of ops related tasks too.
Emily Freeman did a great talk on this event as well around rethinking the software development lifecycle, and it's effectively that. And I think there's huge overlaps between the way we think around the value flywheel, around well architected, around empowering and enabling our teams, and giving them the environment for success, and on what she's starting to propose with that flywheel.
Well, one thing that I definitely think is, let's step right back. The Agile Manifesto was signed around 2000 to 2001, and we went a certain way around kind of how we write software. There's another like sea change coming, and there's a lot of people starting to talk about a different way of creating software. People like John Cutler, all the product-led stuff, the way AWS talk about modern application. There's a lot of people starting to talk in this way. But remember, when the manifesto was signed for Agile in 2000, 2001, so it took some people 15 years to click on that there's a change. A lot of transformation that happened in 2015, 2016. This is going to be the same.
Yep.
If someone comes out and signs a modern application manifesto next week, it could be 2035 between people start looking at it in big companies. So there's an awful long tail in this. So the fact that people see a shape in this now, but aren't quite sure how to describe it, I think is normal. It'll be a rallying point where people say, yes, that's what it is. I don't think it's containers or serverless. That's not going to be what it's called, but who knows?
Yeah. I do
philosophical.
I think it is. Like, I mean, it definitely that would be a podcast or a discussion in itself in terms of, what's changing there. But you're definitely seeing more emphasis on the value and understanding sort of direction and why, which is a dimension that is probably could be looked at with regards with Agile, and you'd see the likes of Cutler and Co, and that's kind of what they're masters of,
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is teams are now able to go fast, but they're not going fast in a sustainable way. They're not going fast in a way that won't blow up in their face at some point.
And there's also an interesting couple of things this past week. People are saying if you have a highly if you have an empowered team, high performing empowered team, it's really hard work to keep that team running because people are just rocking on at a pace, so it's probably more effort to keep that team moving because they're all highly empowered and driving impact, etc. So there's still a lot to play for this, but we could talk all day. Maybe that's another podcast.
Absolutely. The whole ensuring strategic alignment and a fast moving, high performing environment is not easy.
Yeah, it's harder to drive a race car than drive a normal car, so you might end up hitting the wall. So, and I mean, another thing that I found was interesting with these last two events, the DevOps Summit and the Map Camp, is a lot of people were asking us through it, how do you learn all this stuff?
Yeah.
The answer is, I don't know. We've been doing all this stuff while working in jobs and reading loads of stuff and watching loads of stuff and trying things. It's just that thing about constantly keeping up to speed and things and thinking about things and challenging.
Yeah, I think we've been very good at challenging each other and sharing a lot with each other as well. So we'd be on Twitter a lot. We'd be just sending each other sort of messages back and forward. Have you seen this? Have you seen that? We watch all the sort of the events when we get a chance to. And what's been great about, well, not great, but what's been one of the benefits of the pandemic is a lot more material is available to watch asynchronously. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it when you have a spare 10, 15 minutes. So it's that, but the pace of change is just incredible now. And it could, if you let it could be a full-time job, just keeping abreast of the latest and greatest developments. And that's where mapping sort of helps with that cognitive burden. If you map out your landscape and map out what's important to you and your organization or your team, you can zero in on, well, what are the key things that I should be learning? What are the key sort of new emerging areas that I think are relevant to what I'm trying to achieve? Like us three, we're mad. We just absorb all the stuff and read the stuff and read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and watch all the videos and share all the stuff. But it's I think it's a problem that keeping that cognitive burden low for teams is hard, because then we'll say stuff to our teams and they go, I don't know what you're talking about, because we have all talked about it for maybe a week or two, and then you go and introduce your team are like looking at you going, what are you on?
Well, there's like I kind of feel like, and again, you can tell back again, like I just sort of tie it back to map, and I know this sort of the topic of the talk sort of conversation is around map camp, but part of it is curiosity, so we'll sort of knock out a map and kind of just have a conversation around what we think something looks like today, and then you can begin asking yourself some questions around, well, where's this moving? And then, once you kind of get into that mapping kind of mindset, you realize that staying still isn't really an option.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding the why of, position and movement. And then when you begin to have some of those conversations, you begin to realize, well, actually, you begin to spot some of the movement, and then you can begin to focus in on, well, actually, why is that movement happening? And then you can focus on the conversations around, well, who's able to describe that movement? We talk a bit about Agile today. We talk about the DevOps stuff with Emily Freeman. You can kind of see, when and really what you're doing is you're validating your kind of what you're observing, and then all of a sudden you're able to tune in on who's actually describing what you're seeing, and I think that's, we do that. I just don't think it's again, Dave, you mentioned earlier about mindsets. I think there's a certain degree of truth in that. If you're curious and you're mapping out your landscape, and position has meaning, and you're kind of asking yourself, well, why is this here, and what can I do?
Well, I think, yeah, and I mean, I think the big thing as well is technical strategy, and that's not a good name for it, but being able to think strategic where your technology and business platform need to go. And Adrian Cockcroft has a great phrase about existence proof. You sit and you think in this way of thinking, you think about movement and evolution of things, and you almost have a theory. And then there's existence proof. You have a theory, well, this might happen, and then when you see it happening, you go, that's the thing I thought would happen. People used to say to me that mapping was it's like fortune telling. It's not really. You just plot out a path, and then when something happens, you can say, oh yep, that's that thing coming now. So it's existence proof. Adrian talks about the fact that you think something's going to happen, and then you start to see signs of it happening in the industry. So
it's a real efficient way of framing like a problem or a challenge, and talking about it at breadth, and you can cover an immense amount of ground, and I just think it's a really efficient way of consuming information and fitting a picture in your head. So and I think there's definitely a lot of truth in sort of thinking in that way, and I definitely agree with that existence proof. I think that was a talk. Was that a podcast you had with Adrian, and he kind of he was talking about that, and yeah, because that's true. It's just something you kind of go, I'm glad someone else is thinking like that.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other techniques, and I know it's not really a map, but mind maps are great for us to shortcut some of our cognitive load. So if something that we find useful or interesting, or there's some content that we find that we're going back to again and again, we'll create a mind map of it, so that we can shortcut to some of the pertinent areas that are relevant to the context we find ourselves in. So we all do this. All three of us, we would create mind maps, we'd share them with each other, and we would keep them available for people to, here's our well-architected mind map. Here's the things and the questions that you can then rapidly put that context into your head when you're doing a review or whatever, right? So it can kind of lower the burden a little bit.
It's like in service design and then design that diverge and converge, or that kind of harvest and synthesize, or dump everything down and then make sense of it, the sense making. So that there's a couple of different patterns like that. But anyway, sure, we're nearly in time now, so that's the crack, as they say.
Sorry, David, just one last point of the mind maps. We should start a movement to call them mind graphs.
I know.
Mind graphs. You can raise that with Mr. Simon Wardley and see how he gets on. Mr. Map, changing his whole stuff.
I know. Are we actually allowed in the mapping community if we call them mind maps? I don't know.
We'll be kicked out. Now, in fairness, he always says he's just waiting for someone to make them better. But where you go, Mike? You can fight that battle. We'll be behind you all the way.
I'm writing it down.
Good stuff. So that's the crack. So that's us then. So, like I said, we have our blog on the serverlessedge.com, where we put a lot of writing stuff, and we've got at Serverless Edge on Twitter and the Serverless Edge on LinkedIn. So a lot of the thoughts and stuff we're talking about we'll reshare quite generously on those channels, and we're writing a book about this stuff with IT Revolution, due to be out next year in 2022. So subscribe to the channel, or give us a follow on the Serverless Edge at Serverless Edge. Twitter is probably the best place. We'll put everything out there, and that's us. Any more closing thoughts?
No, good stuff. It's amazing how much stuff happens in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's all movement.
My head's constantly sore.
All right, folks. Have a good weekend.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.
There you go.